All right, so this is Theater Collaborative Acts, Chapter 3, Analyzing Theater, pages 53 through 73. We are thinking and writing about live performance. And this is a particularly important distinction between live performance and film performance, and that's going to be a big part of our conversation today. So theater versus film and TV. The obvious difference, of course, is that one is happening with the audience and the actor together in the same space. For film and TV, it is filmed and is often pre-recorded. There are times when there is live TV, particularly. But there are some differences that we're going to illuminate here as we're talking for our thinking today. Um, the big difference, of course, is audience's active participation, and it's an active experience. What is the result of extra effort and resources to experiencing something live? So just imagine you're going to see a play. You hopefully are going sometime. You already have gone, or you're about to go this week in preparation for your theater experience paper due on Monday. Um, but you bought a ticket. You maybe if you have kids like I do, you got childcare. You got in the car. You got dressed. You probably bathed, hopefully, uh, and it took a lot of effort for you to get to the location. So that's number one. The effort that just to get to the theater is the thing. And then once you've gotten there, you've paid a certain amount of money, maybe a significant amount of money, and you're sitting with a bunch of other people who have put in just as much effort as you have. So that's even before the show starts. And then you actually have a very active part to play in crafting the experience of a live performance. So as an audience member, you are paying attention to what you find interesting. You are throwing your focus to wherever it draws your attention. Um, and you have an interactive experience in that way, as opposed to passive watching on a screen of some sort. And there, of course, is ease and convenience to watching a screen, but what is the result of that sort of passive sitting back? You're letting someone show you what to look at, first of all. A director or an editor is sort of crafting the experience, and so you only have that small frame of vision, and it is mostly vision and auditory. You don't have a full corporeal understanding of what's happening. Um, and you have less choice in what to look at, other than swiping left or swiping right. And actually, that's another significant part of this. It's a lot easier to turn off a passive experience. I can just say, "Oh, I'm not interested," and I swipe, and it's gone, and I move on to the next experience. Whereas in a live situation, first of all, the actors, performers know that you're disinterested, particularly if you if you do the live equivalent of swiping one direction or the other and leave. The performers can see you leave. Your fellow audience members can see you leave. That takes a lot of social chutzpah to say, you know what, this just isn't for me, and to get up while everyone watches you get up and leave. So that's something to consider when we're thinking about experiencing theater versus film and TV, and then thinking about what that experience is, trying to encapsulate it, trying to write about it. Um, so this is both for theater makers and for audience members, but there are kind of four things that we're going to frame our thinking today. The theater is live. It's happening right now in the present. It is not recorded. It is not. There may be elements of recording, but it is being triggered and being set off in the moment. It will never be the same. Even if you were to record it, it wouldn't be the same experience as watching it right now. It allows for two-way communication, as I was saying earlier, that you as an audience member, or actually, I'll say that both audience member and actor are able to communicate with each other, and the actor's performance changes as the audience's response to their performance is impacted. So It goes both ways. It's nice and cyclical. It also happens in three dimensions. This is something that we're going to talk quite a bit about today. That it creates a ability for many different vantage points of perspective. So yes, you got me here, and I'm gonna be doing this on a two-dimensional space. But you got the front of me. Oops, sorry. You got the side of me. You got the back of me. And then you also have depth that we'll be looking at in just a second. So just thinking about how that interacts with our brains and how we understand things. It also requires active participation. I just covered that earlier. That you get to craft that all of the participants interact with the material. Um, so often, once I receive all of those things, there's an expectation that once I've received all the stimuli, love that picture of David Tennant and Hamlet, um, that the event will be followed by some sort of understanding. This is an interesting human itch. We want our stories to make sense. And so when we are receiving any sort of abstract information or nonlinear information, unless we are approaching that information with the understanding that it's not supposed to make sense, and even that is a little bit of a narrative that the things that I'm getting, oh, don't worry, it's not supposed to make sense, and I'm just supposed to let it wash over me, and then I'm talking about bathing, or we like to tie on some sort of narrative structure to it. And so it's followed by understanding. And then usually that understanding includes some sort of meaning. And what does meaning mean? Like, then that's kind of where we're headed now when we're talking about writing about theater. Meaning is fluid. It can change. If you see a show one time and then see the same show another time, you will be different. The actors will be different. I like to think of it as a river, that the water changes. The river remains in the same location, but you never walk through the same river twice. It's based on a frame of reference, so whoever is watching the same material, if they had a good day, bad day, it could change the way that material resonates with them. And it is different for each audience member. And this is another reason why three dimensions is so important, because if you're sitting far away from the action, or you are performing to someone who's far away, that's one possibility. There's also the possibility that you are sitting on the far right or far left of the auditorium or playing space. And so you're seeing a very different vantage point than someone who's sitting on the opposite side of you. Um, Also, if you are performing to a large or a wide audience, you know that I'm talking to a character, they only get this side of me. They only get the profile of, or three-quarters of me, as opposed to I'm talking directly to the audience, and that three-dimensionality shifts the way that we interact with one another. So when we're analyzing a production, there are kind of two parts to it. We have to observe what is actually happening, and that is see, hear. Those are the two predominant ones, and that you also tend to use when you're watching film or television. But when you're in the theater, you can also feel. You're experiencing actual sound rate waves made by other human beings in the space. You're actually syncing heartbeats with the people sitting next to you. Someday when we talk about acting, I'll talk about extension of energy, that we actually radiate heat. We radiate energy outside of our bodies to other people. And that feeling can resound and resonate and expand as you're sitting in a communal setting. Smell, I know we don't very often smell, and sometimes smelling is not a great thing, but it is something. My quick anecdote about smell at the theater: I was watching Our Town at Barrow Street Theater in 2008, I think, and I began weeping at the smell of bacon. Because if you know Our Town, it's a play with very, very sparse theatrical elements. It's just acting and ladders, chairs, maybe a table. But for the most part, the actors mime everything. And you see two mothers preparing breakfast every morning of each scene of the play. And And then one of the protagonists dies, Emily very famously, and wants to go back in as part of the story and wants to return to the town, not realizing what that implication would mean. And at the very end of the play, they draw back a curtain, and there is Emily's mother frying up real bacon, and just the smell of real bacon hit me as an audience member, and tears just started running down my face. And it was a really impactful moment. And so we dare not neglect smell, and we dare not neglect taste. Very seldom will you be asked to taste things, but when you go to the movies or a performance with other people, inevitably there's going to be some food. You might have a beverage. That's kind of fun. Um, I've yet to deal with a whole lot of taste design, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist in live theater. And then once we've made these observations, then we have an interpretation to do, and this is a subjective experience. This is not. It would be hard for everyone to have the exact same interpretation of any live situation because everyone's perspective is different depending upon where they're sitting. There are different visceral resonances depending upon what your relationship is with the material. Perhaps you're sitting and watching and you love a good violent story and you get riled and you get wrapped up in the violence of a story. Or perhaps you are averse to any sort of violence. And anytime someone gets hit or screamed at, there is a shrinking and a fight or flight that gets switched on. So that visceral resonance, and again, we're talking about empathetic response in this regard, and how you maintain aesthetic distance. You'll find that visceral resonance. There are larger ideas and themes that you might come through as you interpret. Let's say Romeo and Juliet, and what ideas and themes might you draw from that story of star-crossed lovers? And then personal relevance, and I guess we'll stick with Romeo and Juliet. If you know what it is to be in love, then that story might mean something very different to someone who doesn't have that frame of reference, or maybe just broke up with a loved one, someone that they loved romantically, and so when they see it, it has a very different personal relevance to that person. So once we've wrapped up the observation and begin interpreting things, there's some aspects of theater specifically that we want to offer some background to. Thinking about actors' performances. This headshot is a headshot of a dear friend of mine named Ken Bolden. He's a Pittsburgh-based actor. Actually, just this year was pronounced Pittsburgh's top actor by the Pittsburgh Gazette. But he's a very good actor, and so we'll use him as an example. So believability is number one. And when we talk about believability, we have to recognize that there are two parts to that. That the authenticity of a character comes from a playwright creating the dialogue, and then the actor delivering that dialogue. So it could be that the playwright is not particularly great at writing dialogue, and therefore it chips away at the authenticity and therefore the believability of the play. Or perhaps the playwright is a fantastic writer of dialogue. It sounds exactly like humans speak, but there are some deficiencies in the actor, or the actors just are not connecting with the text, and therefore it chips away at the authenticity of the character, and therefore it becomes less believable. Hopefully, both the playwright and the actor are firing on all cylinders, and we can enter into a state of believability, as we talked about last week with the actor's space and audience. And then we have to recognize that the actor is playing a character. This is the persona from last week. Ken is one of those kind of actors that there is believability no matter what kind of character he's playing, even if the character is dealing with some really weird given circumstances, like living in a garbage can at Endgame. There's a sincerity, you can see it in his eyes and his headshot, good headshot, that radiates through each of his performances. There's an intelligence and a warmth. And if that actor is that shines through as in every character they play. But maybe they're a very, very good actor and can switch off whatever their personal characteristics are and can adapt so that their characters are vastly different depending upon each play that they're in. And they're able to make these manipulations through specific choices. Again, we got an acting chapter coming up after midterms. But particularly, again, the difference between film and theater, film and TV and theater is that I would put movement and voice above emotional life. Now, hopefully, and I am an actor that thinks this way, that emotional life is essential, and if you don't have that internal emotional life, then there's no point in playing the stories for my money. But if the audience cannot see and the audience cannot hear what you are going through as an actor, it does not matter what your emotional life is. So voice and movement in the theater is very, very important. And then the effect of circumstances on both the actor and the character, depending upon what your personal relationship is with the material as an actor. Sometimes you're playing at a certain type of human behavior, and sometimes you're actually going through that human behavior and living through it more, I guess you could say, realistically. We'll talk about style in just a moment and realism in general, but sometimes you're really angry, and sometimes you're just trying to get to it so it is clear to the audience that you're angry. So when we're thinking about character interaction, so we have actors, that's one thing, and then you throw on the other layer that actors are not alone on stage very often. And even when you are monologuing and you are a solo actor, you always have the audience on stage as another character in a play. So actors are always working together as a team. That's called an ensemble. Famously, in the last couple years, this is Merrily We Go, Roll Along with Lindsay Mendez, Jonathan Groff, and Daniel Radcliffe. There's a new film coming out shortly. In fact, it is already out, I think, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. But they were a fantastic ensemble. And then in order to receive that ensemble, there's kinesthetic, there's the feeling, there's more specifically listening and responding, that you're taking in stimuli from the other actors and responding as honestly and truthfully as you can from those other actors. And then lastly, there's one of the most distracting things that can happen when you're dealing in an ensemble, and someone either is having a really poor day or maybe their skill set is just a little bit lower, they check out. They're no longer in the play because they're not speaking, or maybe even while you're having a scene and they are speaking and their brains go, whoo. This is a great picture of The Iceman Cometh with Brian Dennehy and Nathan Lane at the Goodman in Chicago. I just love Dennehy's glare as Nathan tries to take the shot glass from the other actor. I'm sorry, I don't know that character actor's name. But any actor with their salt is staying involved with the action. If they are on stage, they are in the play. And even if they are not part of the central narrative at the time. And once we have those actors and those character interactions, which hopefully works toward believability and authenticity, makes it real easy to be empathetic and feel like you can gauge that aesthetic distance as an audience needs to have, we start thinking about space and design. And of course, as we were talking about before, it's 3 dimensions. So there's height, and then there's width, and then there's depth. And depth is kind of the big thing that we don't necessarily get on film. We have depth of field, which is the camera's understanding of, and I mean, it's hard for me even to explain this without showing you a picture and a depth of field. The illusion of the central actor, Bruce Gomez, who's playing Fabian in Twelfth Night. It looks like a miniature person compared to the 2 actors standing in front of him, simply because that depth of field. So if I'm holding my hand up like this, my hands are the same size, but they look different when they're on camera. It's an illusion that our brains and we can manipulate in the camera. In space, we feel it very differently. We have proprioception and exteroception that are at our behest when we are in an actual space with other bodies, which is more than those five senses. It's our understanding of space and depth in actual space. I'm repeating that. So 3 dimensions. And we have different manipulations of those sorts of things. This is, of course, from Oklahoma, a very famously wide landscape, big skies, and hopefully if a scenic designer is doing their work, the set is going to emulate that. We had a lot of space right and left of us. This you can see with the floorboards, there's also a slight manipulation going back into space to make it feel like the depth of the stage is even deeper than it actually is. We're also playing with height. Those gentlemen up on top of the roof add a lot of height, which is an exciting thing when we're dealing with potential and kinetic energy. And you see somebody up there and like, well, that's possible they could fall down, which adds tension and energy and excitement into any performance. The amount of properties that are on the stage and how we are filling that three-dimensional space is also something to take in context. This is from Chris Child, and that's Tom Real Malfoy from the films, who is currently, I think he's currently still on Broadway. Tom Felton playing that role. But in a otherwise very spectacular performance, this is a very sparse setting, and we can delineate things with that sort of juxtaposition of theme and how much stuff is in the space, how cluttered it is, and gauging positive and negative spaces. We're looking at scenery. This is from the musical Six. Very clearly, wild design choices, which I think are so much fun. A lot of geometric shapes, a lot of hinting at historical costuming, but very clearly not actually the costumes. This would be the Six Wives of Henry VIII, which took place in the early 1500s. And so corsets were totally a thing, and long skirts. You would never see legs in that era. They would all be under humongous boned skirts. And of course, they didn't have electric guitars at that time either. But it's still telling the story of those individuals in a different light, in a very 2026 sort of way. This is something from a very similar time. This is Man for All Seasons. I actually have two pictures of that play for a very specific reason here. Set a little bit before Henry VIII reign. I believe it was one of Thomas Cromwell. Blah, blah, blah. No, this would have been around the same time. But two very different settings for the same play. And there's a reason for that. Similar time periods dramatically, but they are very, very different designs. And I chose these pictures for specific reasons. The book goes through representational and presentational design. I'm adding this other sort of category, revisionist or juxtaposition design. Simply because a revisionist and juxtaposition could be either presentational or representational. A representational set looks and functions as a real thing. This would go both in performance style. It could go for set design, costume design, prop design. The sort of entire encapsulation of a production can be representational. It could also be presentational, where events are not meant to resemble everyday life. This is a design on the bottom that does not look at all like a 14th century English manor. It has little elements that suggest it, but for staging purposes, and I'm sure that you could infer when you are After you observe, you could then interpret that these platforms are indicating class or allowing folks to have different levels of strata within the British society. You could start thinking along those lines. And oftentimes, presentational designs push us toward those sort of cerebral interpretations. Similarly, revisionist and juxtaposition type designs could be presentational or representational, but shifts the original setting of the play. Very clearly, this musical six, first of all, they didn't have musical instruments at that time period, nor microphones, nor were there that many African folks from the African diaspora living in Britain at the time. There were a few, but not a whole lot. And so it's fascinating to tell those stories. Certainly, the storytelling, the script itself, is also in stark contrast to and giving empowerment to women who did not have any means of power and met their end simply because they could not fit into the demands of what society was granting them, mainly giving the king what he wanted, sadly. We can keep in mind this idea of representational or presentational thinking when we go into interpreting different plays. So that brings us to style and a conversation around what general style is. It can be a manner of expression. There are acting styles. Realism is an acting style. That was probably the thing we are most aware of as American digesters of media, where we are pretending to feel as realistic as possible, as if we were talking to someone as with as much truth as possible. This manner of expression can also lead to what the playwright has written. Sometimes there is a manner of terse or angry language. It could be flowery or poetic language if you're dealing with Shakespeare. Although there's angry language in Shakespeare, it just tends to be structured very differently. But the manner of expression is one way to identify style and then to lean in as you are designing to try and match it. I love this. So methods of onstage behavior. So someone who is going to spray paint graffiti on the walls gives you a very clear understanding of what kind of play you're in. Now, if it can be in juxtaposition to other people's behavior, but inevitably that kind of gesture, physical gesture, can illuminate what kind of society and what kind of style we're playing in. That's just one way through. And then finally, our fancy letter, the way in which content is packaged can also indicate style. So as we are going back to those pictures, if you're having sequence and bright lights and microphones telling a story, that might indicate what kind of style you're dealing with. Fun, playful, flashy, as opposed to a very simple table and chairs and very dire costuming, lets us know that maybe we're in for a different sort of night, with more introspection or drama. And of course, all style can encapsulate all of those things, and can be pretty nuanced. So plays are written in a specific style. Playwrights begin by delineating, this is what I would like this play to function as. And then style may also be altered in a production. So I get the script, but I want to turn this a different way, says a director or a designer. I want to put sequins on these girls while they sing into microphones. And then finally, style can be borrowed from different cultures. I'm sorry, my picture is in the way, but that says cultures behind there. Styles can be borrowed from different cultures. They can also be appropriated from different cultures. And this is a word, particularly in the last, since the turn of the century, has been in a significant amount of debate. A lot of American culture has come from other cultures and has sort of been, we are either fictitiously or not, a melting pot of cultures in America. As the idea of colonization and how invading cultures take what they like and leave the parts that they don't like, appropriation and things being appropriated has become something that theater artists have to be really conscientious of. Because cultural context exists whether the creators are aware of it or not. So whether you are aware that I'm taking this ceremonial garb because I think it looks pretty, but I'm ignoring the fact that it has significance to an entire culture of people, that says something about something about the play. It also says something about me as a theater maker. It also says something about the garment if I'm using it in a way that is contrary to its original use. And so it's important to be thoughtful when we're watching those things, but also when we are making those creative choices. So ask these questions to try to navigate borrowed cultural style in the future. Have the borrowers considered cultural context? So we'll go back to that ceremonial garment. If I know that it's a ceremonial garment, if I ask, and say more than, it's just pretty, or, this gives me a certain feeling, sometimes that certain feeling can be stereotypical thinking about an entire culture. But if you've considered that cultural context, that can help make different choices. Is it appropriate to borrow that cultural style without personal relationship to the context? We'll talk more readily about that in just a moment. And then, is a new style being created by the aesthetic blending of styles from different cultures? American music is kind of my very first go-to when I think about this. Blues, country, all of the popular music that we listen to is a huge, that truly is a melting pot of a bunch of different musical styles that have merged together, particularly in the American South. You have African beats, you have Irish ballad structure, you have the French folks in New Orleans, and the Creole folks that kind of make the blues and jazz. And then it all sort of rubs together and forms three different, you get blues, you get jazz, you get country, all out of that melting pot of cultural friction. So while we want to be aware and not, I feel, this is my own personal feeling, not appropriate things where I'm taking things without that cultural context just because I think it's pretty or just because it appeals to me, but I don't know what the significance of it is. There is value in recognizing the traditions that I am drawing from and borrowing in order to create new aesthetics that can hopefully amplify the old traditions and create new ones. So, appropriated question mark. An example of this would be The Mikado by Gilbert and Sullivan. Here are some pretty cringy pictures of British people in yellowface from the original production by D'Oyly Carte's opera company. Gilbert and Sullivan wrote operettas and were sort of the forebearers of the American musical. I actually love the music and the plot of The Mikado, and it's as appropriation entered into the American theater making mindset, it becomes a show that would be really hard for me to do with any sort of without some sort of satire. It already is a satire. It's written to be a satire. But some of my Japanese American friends, I think, would feel very strongly to go at that play to produce it. Um, on the other hand, there is M. Butterfly by David Henry Hwang, a Japanese-American writer, a queer writer, and it is a play about a real cast of courtesan, basically. It would be a female impersonator in feudal Japan, um, and it's a story of I believe it's an Englishman. I actually have to look that up. But it is a white man going into feudal Japan and navigating a real relationship with this courtesan. It's a heartbreaking play, beautiful, and was recently revived in 2014. So, evaluating production. Um, when we're looking at a production, we start to look to interpret things. We want to look at the context of performance. For example, what is the purpose of the performance, and what are the expectations of the audience? Those two pictures you just saw, very bright, colorful. Mean Girls photo. This is current photo is from the History Boys. Two very different plays, same time period in a kid's life, but two very different stories. So, what is the purpose of performing those things? Is it a community theater to create community? Is it a rebellious or civil disobedient type of production? And did the audience show up to view those kind of productions? So that's an important part before we even start digesting what the play and the designs are. What is the artistic intent of the individual artist? So what was intended by the artist? How well did the production achieve goals? Here's Wile E. Coyote intending to get that Roadrunner and failing miserably. How were the goals worth attempting? And then last, taste is your personal preference, what you're actually interested in. Dionysus and Apollo are up there for a specific reason. There's a kind of delineation in art criticism, whether art is Dionysian or low art, and Apollonian or high art. These two gods have different connotations. Low art would be fart jokes and sex and violence and sort of the baser inclinations of our human nature, whereas Apollonian art would be high-minded ideals and beautifully crafted music that inspires and lifts our souls. These two things can blend together, but they might blend together in a particular way for each individual taste. Going to really talk quickly about the role of the critic. There's a video awaiting you to watch that can illuminate this a little bit more. But in short, the role of the critic in 2026 is in significant flux, particularly in America and Britain, simply because of social media, the decline of print news, and the rise of influencers, where it's harder to tell the difference between theater criticism and theater marketing. So there's a really interesting conversation on the Game Changers podcast on YouTube. It is your next assignment, and you only need to take a look at the chapters that are listed in the assignment. It is an hour and 30 minutes. I'm not asking you to watch an hour 30 minutes worth of podcast, but do take a look at it. It's very interesting. Lastly, we got helpful hints for writing about theater. So this is to help you craft your theater experience paper. It's writing about theater particularly. So we've seen the show, we've thought about the show. Now it's time to write something down. Timeline in writing, preparation is number one. Then this is 4 parts. Observe and participate in the show itself. Then make notes shortly after the performance so that you're not trying to harken back to something that is vague and maybe not at your fingertips. And then draft and craft a paper. That's a big part of number 4, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So writing about theater, we want preparation before the show. It's a good idea to read the play in advance if you have the opportunity to. You don't have to. I actually kind of like discovering a show in the moment. So sometimes, it can be a good idea if it is helpful for you to have a preconceived idea of the play ahead of time. Note the theater space and read and keep the program So we're doing all that before the show begins. What kind of theater are you sitting in, and who are the folks who are performing the show for you? Then maximize observation during the show. Turn that attention to the world of the stage. Turn phones off if you are at all able to do so. Take notes at intermission or after the performance rather than during the performance. If you really need to, you can make a quick note on a program. But active note taking while the show is going on can be really distracting for your fellow audience members and also for the performers, depending upon how apparent the audience is to them. And it also takes you out of it fully experiencing the show. You're placing your focus on a piece of paper or your phone as opposed to what the audience and the actors and the production team are producing and creating together. Then, after you've observed as much as you can, hear, smell, taste, touch, see, then you want to make notes as soon as you can after the show. Jot down first and last impressions, notable performances and designs by particular actors and designers, major themes and ideas. And then, and this, for me, I really, really like writing down longhand just because it helps me synthesize. If you are a computer person and like typing with your thumbs, by all means do. I just find that it doesn't help me think. My brain works differently, and it's hard for me to cross-reference when I'm using a glowing box. So draft and craft your thoughts more than once. You can use paper and pencil just to outline things prior to getting to the computer. Once you get to the computer, you want to support ideas with opinions with evidence from the performance, and then follow the good bad thing impulse with why. But we don't want to be talking in just, oh, it was good, oh, it was bad, and not enter into the why did I find it that way. And it stops you from investigating your own taste, and it also stops you from investigating why the theater makers made the choices that they did. Always, as soon as you want to say, oh, it was good, ask yourself why, or oh, it was bad, it was awful. Ask yourself why, and then you'll find a richer answer to write about. Okay, so due February 16th, theater experience paper number 1. Write a critical review of the play according to the standards of dramatic criticism found in the textbook. I'm looking for a 400 to 600 word paper. So you need to be efficient, but I'd like to know as much about your experiences as you can. Convey the content and context of the production with personal insight. Cite specific examples from the production across disciplines and credit the creatives behind the work, and thoroughly identify and articulate why or why not the play is personally appealing to you, the author of the paper. All right. Thanks so much, folks. Have a great week.